The reason most people in America don't worry about polio, measles, mumps, rubella is because they've been vaccinated.
He says there are still about 67 million people still unvaccinated, and they put the economy and others in need of medical care at risk.
Fox's Gernal Scott, even with the vaccines, more people have died from COVID-19 so far this year than in all of 2020. Pfizer requesting the Food and Drug Administration to give its coronavirus vaccine emergency authorization for use in children as young as 5. Currently, kids have to be at least 12 to get the shot. Pfizer claims 2 low-dose shots give the younger kids robust immunity. America is listening to Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
As the search for Brian Laundrie continues, his father joining a search effort Thursday in a Florida wildlife reserve. Meanwhile, the family of Laundrie's late girlfriend, Gabby Petito, giving an exclusive interview to Fox's Laura Ingle.
It was just over a month ago when Gabby Petito's parents knew something had gone wrong with their daughter's cross-country road trip. Now they are sharing how the next few days unfolded, starting with their reaction to one of the most significant clues in the case when Gabby's white van was found back at her boyfriend's house in Florida without her.
I screamed. I didn't mean to scream at the detective. I said, "Where's my daughter? Where is she?"
Gabby Petito's mother, Nicole Schmidt, remembers the moment she feared the most.
The night I knew the van was in Florida, I instinctively knew that my daughter was not here anymore.
Gabby's parents say they want to let law enforcement handle the search for Brian while they focus on the new Gabby Petito Foundation in Blue Point, New York. Laura Ingle, Fox News.
The governors of Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania agreeing to share information about firearms purchases. The 4 Democratic governors say it will help them target gun networks that cross state lines. The AP reports former President Trump will assert executive privilege to prevent the House Select January 6th committee from compelling the testimony of 2 of his former White House aides. Tesla confirming it is moving its headquarters out of California.
CEO Elon Musk said during a shareholders meeting that the electric vehicle pioneer is moving its headquarters out of Palo Alto, California to Austin, Texas, where it has been building a new factory for a little more than a year. But the company's not moving out of California entirely and will continue to operate its Fremont plant with plans to increase production there. Last December, Musk personally relocated to the Austin area from Los Angeles, where he had lived for 2 decades.
Fox's Hillary Barsky. And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
There's so much that's new with the Eat Fresh, Refresh at Subway restaurants that we can't possibly fit it all into one radio spot, but I'm gonna try. There are amazing new toppings like hickory smoked bacon, bacon and smashed avocado. Try your favorite sub on the new breads like the hearty multigrain wheat or the artisan Italian white bread. Not to mention Subway's thicker, juicier steak. That's all I have time for. You gotta refresh to be fresh. Only at Subway.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Good afternoon and welcome to Tall Tales for Friday, October 8th. I'm Darrell Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. Here to take your calls at 888-8255 if there's something on your mind. And if you're here to enjoy the show, well, I do hope you are enjoying it and thinking about what's going on. Of course, if you got something that you'd like to share with the rest of us, give us a call, 888-8255. And don't have anything for Second Amendment. I know yesterday we really got the pot stirred with the one story we had, and of course, it is an active topic in our nation today. Whether it's incited by the news of another shooting, or it's the advancing lawsuits towards the Supreme Court itself preparing to take up a couple of questions. It's an active discussion, and that's what we do here on Tall Tales, is have active discussions. Again, our telephone number here is 888-8255. Also, you can make comments on our Facebook page. We're on Facebook and YouTube Live. So got folks already watching, and so we're and watching on Facebook and listening, of course, like you are. It's a beautiful day outside. A couple days ago, I was looking at the weather history for the past several days. And up in Jigo, that was one of the areas that got 10 inches of rain. Incredible. My wife was telling me that it was just raining and raining and raining. But I wasn't there. I was down here. And so, with you, which was fine, but I didn't know all that rain was dumping up there. And so now I know why everything is so, scrubbed down, clean outside. Let's take a look at the editorials today on Zami Ikatni. And we have a couple of editorials today to take a look at from the Pacific Daily News and the Guam Daily Post. The one in the PDN is Guam should provide free internet in public housing. At least that's what it was called on the online page when I was reading it early this morning. Taking a look at trying to find it here. I guess I need more practice thumbing through newspapers to find the page. And then, no? Boy, it's way back in here. Yes. The print version reads, free internet. It's time to provide servers to public housing. Which is, if you know anything about computers, you wouldn't use that word, servers, because you're not going to have servers for multiple users who are not linking to the same thing. And there's service, which certainly we do need, but we don't have, we need service. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at this editorial today. On Wednesday, the government of Puerto Rico announced it would be providing free high-speed internet service to more than 300 public housing projects across the territory. The $11.8 million project, which should be complete by the end of next year, is designed to serve school children. It will include technical education centers in every housing project that offer computer and printing services to residents, according to public housing officials in that territory. This is an idea worth exploring on Guam, where internet access could help not only children but also adults. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, in a January document offering guidance for the use of public housing funds to support internet access, explained that, quote, in the 21st century, broadband internet is vitally important for education, employment, health, and connection to others, end quote. And then it continues. During the COVID-19 pandemic, its critical role in helping Americans conduct transactions of daily life has become even more apparent. It has allowed Americans to continue working and learning and to connect to essential community services while remaining in the safety of their homes. Yet many low-income Americans, especially those served by HUD's public housing program, have less access to broadband internet devices and the training to use them. Closing the digital divide, the gap between those who have internet service access and those who don't, benefits all of society. A well-educated, self-sufficient, employed populace should be the goal, and greater access to everything from basic information to health services and employment information is tied to the internet. People who live in public housing are generally in need of social services, and online access to these services is critical. In the modern world, many companies only accept job applications online. The Guam Department of Labor's American Job Center, while providing on-site services at its offices, has a robust website where people can build resumes and apply for jobs. Tens of thousands of Guam residents became familiar with the HireGuam.com site during the pandemic, as it was the home of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, PUA. The program, which was started from scratch and implemented within months, ran relatively smoothly as an online process. Although PUA has ended, job seekers can still take advantage of links to training opportunities, educational benefits, and financial assistance. The website can be checked for updates to jobs and has a full section to connect older workers with job opportunities. For people without internet access, these services either won't be explored or they will be explored by arranging transportation, spending money for gas, driving to a location, waiting in line, and hoping that all information and documents are together on the day of the trip. The Department of Revenue and Taxation has also enhanced its online presence in recent years, as evidenced by the recent filings for All Rise program payments. Most of the applications were filed online. For those that weren't, people had to schedule time to file and wait in long lines. Registration for COVID-19 vaccines has also been conducted online, and now registration for booster shots is taking place online. Information about public welfare benefits and registration and applications for benefits can also be sent online. For people living in public housing, online access can save a car trip or two. With gas prices at $4.85 a gallon, this is a significant concern. Similarly, online access can solve transportation problems for adults who want to continue or resume their education. Our community has money for recovery projects. We should spend some of that money to provide internet access in public housing. It will open up opportunities for education and employment and develop skills in our workforce. It will help all of Guam. That was the editorial in today's Pacific Daily News. Free internet, it's time to provide servers to public housing. When I first read this, I know it's obvious that not only has the world of business turned to the convenience and the expeditious exchange of information online, but so have individuals, everyday people, with their smartphones, access to social media, access to entertainment, access to information and access to each other. And for years, because I do work with and for a telecom consultant, we've been discussing various initiatives that have been brought up time and time again to explore locating Wi-Fi at the schools so that the students who are means tested eligible for assistance can access educational links from home, accessing the school's own, the school system's own network that's designed to serve outside the school. We've had, the government of Guam has stood up a Office of Information Technology. It's been around for 10 years. People have been expecting the government of Guam agencies to become more automated. And it's not that it's important to boost private personal use of technology. It's a way to address the long lines and the difficulty of having to hire more people to address more people face to face in the government of Guam. It's the problem of providing public services. It's not a personal problem. It's a community-wide problem of services not being provided, or simply the government's late to the game. Now, as I read this article, this editorial, I was thinking this is a really good time to bring up some labels. Bleeding heart liberals, tax and spend Democrats, fiscal conservatives who see America as the land of opportunity, and also people who don't want taxes to go up because of welfare, or they want welfare to be cut back because it's a disincentive to production. If you keep giving people things, they're not going to want to go out and work for them. And I'm just talking generalities here, because these generalities necessarily leave out a lot of detail and a lot of understanding. So should public funds, even federal funds, go to this use? And this is an initiative of HUD, the Housing and Urban Development. Why are they in the game, and only for their housing areas? They've got Section 8 scattered all over, units contracted all over the island. Why should HUD go forward to do something that the Guam Public Library has been doing, the school system has been trying to do? Why is it HUD? It's because there's federal funds behind it. But at some point, those funds may end, because we're talking about, a local infrastructure build out, and maybe it's only to get it started and not to maintain it as a regular service over the years. But it's a different format. For HUD to do it, it's not the same as lining up calling in the providers and saying, people who come in and are eligible for this particular level of public services, just sign them up and send us the bill. That would be a different approach, wouldn't it? And us being us, the people of Guam. Send us the bill, we'll support this. Because then who's going to pay for it? It's going to come out of the taxes that we ourselves pay to develop our own community? Hell no. Roll back that tax. You see, what I'm trying to get at here is There are people who think it's a really good idea as long as somebody else is paying for it. And also, they're not looking at what the benefit is. Do we want people to remain in perpetually stuck, generation upon generation? We want to cultivate an underclass. Then there's a way to do that, and that is to be, lowball it. On the other hand, how far do you want this to go? You see, if the government is going to be running it, how many people are going to have to watch over the computers like a library? And how often will these computers be upgraded so that these are actually current? Will residents develop a continuing dependence on the government to provide this service? What's next? Telephones? Will there be government nannies to censor freedom of access to certain prohibited sites and publications, as is being done in conservative communities in states like Kansas, Arkansas, and Texas? Should we do that? Should we design the program that way, where everything runs through a central filter? Or is this any different than a public library? But with the public library, you don't buy certain books if you think that it's going to be contrary to the values and morals of the community. Or is this just a new use for old library buildings and just a matter of empire building? What the PDN has brought out today is that there are people who are moving forward, cutting through the hesitancy on the part of the community at large to provide a service for people who are already documented as being unable to afford these community-wide standard services. And they're recommending that we do that also here, because there's actually money in GURA to get it done within their own communities, within their own developments. It's a start, but it just shows that the government of Guam and the people of Guam are not willing to do it ourselves for ourselves. And that has to be made really clear, because that perspective sours good ideas and prevents there from being consensus in the community, so there is political will in the legislature to improve our government. So I want to thank the Pacific Daily News for threading this needle very carefully on their, although they don't know what the difference between servers and service. I'll give them that. I had some more comments here. Let's be serious. There's difficulty administering after-school tutoring programs. Computer literacy is necessary for some jobs. And since public housing developments are filled with families eligible for public assistance, this is just one more way to break the cycle of poverty by affording access to learning technology that well-off families take for granted. I don't know what you think of this, but that's what I think about it. And I thank you very much for listening and tuning in to Tall Tales this afternoon. Before I start the next one, because we have a break coming up in about 4 minutes, but I just wanted to mention something here. I see on page 10 of the Guam Daily Post that the CNMI governor forms the Universal Garbage Collection Task Force. Now, why is this important? Why would I even bother bringing it up? Why wouldn't I talk about Iron Dome? You know, why don't we treat ourselves like we're, like Hamas is on its, is sitting on Cocos Island ready to lob rockets at us. Because if in the CNMI they can make a task force, as proposed earlier this year by the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, they're suggesting a regular curbside pickup schedule and installation of trash receptacles in open spaces, garbage collection zones with communal garbage transfer stations, with promoting reducing, reusing, and recycling, and strict enforcement and consistent enforcement of the CNMI anti-littering law. And the creation of the collection system will provide for greater efficiencies in the collection of solid waste among the villages and businesses, reduce the incentives for littering, provide for community receptacles, and establish greater efficiencies among private operators in the solid waste collection services. And so there are professionals, government officials, and also officials in the private sector, all contributing to this task force. What is interesting to me, and the reason I want to bring this up, is because up in Saipan, they don't have the kind of littering problem that we have here. They just don't. And they collect trash, and they have a robust recycling effort already. And here it is, they're ramping that up. Here on Guam, as rich as we are, we could afford to have stateside company come out and take care of our order dump and rebuilding a new landfill for us. We just had millions of dollars to spend to hire somebody to do something that we didn't want to do for ourselves. And now it's a big surprise when the cells down at Ladson fill up faster than projected, as if somebody wasn't watching how many trucks are going in, counting how many trucks are going in, and how many cubic yards are being dumped every day in there. The rest of us know because we don't have a place to take recyclables. You try taking stuff over to Public Works, and they will give you the third degree. Where did you get this?
Denied.
Yeah. So stuff is piling up. They'll take your glass. The rest of it just kind of goes to bulk. If it's in a bag, they don't bother. In Saipan, they don't want you to put stuff in bags. They want it loose so they can inspect it, and they can sort it, and they can come back and go, that's not right. But here, what comes in through private, what comes in through Gov Guam, as long as it's in a bag, it doesn't matter. It's going into the landfill anyway. And those cells are filling up fast, and they cost upwards of $10 million to make a new one. And they're filling up faster than the rate that they were designed to, because they were designed to have recycling and reuse. And we're not doing that as a community. There isn't a Guam Solid Waste Authority and private and the public actively involved in improving that system. But that's okay. We have plenty of money to spend on this. And it's a good time to take a break. We'll be back after this short break with more Tall Tales and your telephone calls at 888-8255.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instagram to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
And welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. Taking a look at some of the comments on Facebook Live from the PDN editorial. Bonnie says, this just adds, this is putting the internet into the public housing projects. They use buzzwords like education for low-income children and more convenient to get people to agree with their ideology. And this just adds to keeping you home and controlled by the internet, giving big tech more power and control of people. Big tech and big pharma is controlling the world. Well, and the people who have the means and the people who are running businesses are using the tools to get their jobs done. We've never had control over the content of television and radio, except for the obscenities. The internet ramps this up because people have access to multiple sources. Not like in radio, you have one source that's broadcast to multiple receivers. Online, individuals can access multiple sources on their own time, not by a schedule. And if people don't have the values to use those technologies and access in a responsible and constructive manner, well, then we need to be talking about values and value education. But the freedom to access that information the freedom is available to those who can afford it, not to those who are who may wish to avail themselves of it because it's convenient, more convenient than standing in line, or missing out on the information altogether, or not being able to file an application that the government is putting online. Let's see what else has. Tough call. Some are perpetually in public assistance. Why go above the threshold if most conveniences and services are provided? That's a valid point. Perhaps we should start withdrawing services or tell them that there's a sunset provision. After 5 years, you just out on the street for you. So you have, your kids are 5 years old. When they become 10, out you go. If you don't have, if you can't get your production up above a living wage that can afford housing and all this. If we want to break the cycle of poverty, then well, if you don't want to break the cycle of poverty, you don't have to do anything. If you want to, then you've got to do something. And what are those? Are you going to set aside certain jobs for them? Are you going to what's an idea? How to bring the children up?
Yeah, this discussion, not just the specifics of what's being provided, but just how to provide services for people, even to define what poverty is, because we all know the threshold of poverty in the United States is actually wealth for a lot of other nations as well. So what is a basic thing? What is a living wage? What can somebody who provides something for another person able to say, well, you can't have this, but you can have that? Like the SNAP cards, for instance, right? There's virtually no limit on what you can buy except for, certain products or types of products, categories of products.
Mhm.
But if they want to eat, you want to buy the top end meats, right, or the things that are a little more pricey, even for some people who aren't on public assistance, they can't afford. You really ought not tell that person they're not allowed to have that. And there's been some arguments on that. So it's kind of this catch-22, because we know in the States that there are a lot of people who are perpetually on public assistance, single mothers who don't get married, keep under a certain income level, just so that they don't get kicked out or lose qualifications. It's just really tough.
If there were enough jobs where the rate of pay was sufficient to both hold the job and meet the needs of the family without having public assistance, and have somebody a safe place to put the children during the day, whether they're going to school, or if they're preschool, then some daycare. People would rather take that. And you see this time and time again in communities where there are people who are poor. If there's migrants, they will take the jobs because they know the difference. But if you cut benefits, the people whose benefits were cut don't take those jobs because they already know what the cost of living is, and they don't have the same social networks where they're going to be living 15 to a house in violation of the housing codes and all this. Expectations are part of what we cultivate in this country. And so how do you improve society generally? There's some people, this comes up even in the context of a discussion of universal health insurance or Medicaid for all, because what's the alternative? Do you simply say, we want you all just to go present yourself to the public health clinics and we'll meet your needs there? In person, one person at a time. We'll hire the doctors and we'll bring in the medicines and we'll refer you. But at some point, we're going to tell you, no, the people of this country or the people of this state, the people of this island are not willing to pay for your treatment, your medicine. You're just going to have to go off and die. That is, at some point, it gets to that. And I don't really want to cite the extreme cases, but it's a continuum. And these are faced every day by a significant portion of the population, not just here, but throughout the United States. We have immigration issues. They face the same thing. What's the cost of living? And what's the standard for living? Is it okay to live in cardboard and squat and make squatter communities? Is it okay? That's the homeless question. If it's okay, if we want that to be okay, then you're going to start seeing squatter camps down at Tangeesan Beach and along the Tamuning Cliff line and in lands, government lands. And if we say that's okay, then we're also saying it's okay for the children in those families to lack, or even places like some years ago, Gilbaza subdivision. It's okay. Let them buy the land, and let them if they want, they're gonna rise out of poverty. We don't care if that road has potholes so deep and big that the ambulances, police cars, and school buses can't go in there. Walk out.
Well, that's the tough thing. Again, tough call, because we try to apply this one-size-fits-all solution to something that really is incredibly diverse. Again, we get to the definitions of poverty. If we get beyond the platitudes that we need to do something, what is it that we need to do? Are we going to keep throwing money at it, services at it, provide things for free? Is there something we can go beyond? Like, let's take, for instance, medical, right? We know that people always tout you should be able to seek medical attention. But what if the choices that led them to that was actually the problem and not the problem of access to medical to medication, to services or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's
not quite
kind of tagging onto.
Are you talking about poor eating habits and developing diabetes, and then?
Well, without going into specifics, all of that. What about the choices that are being made? Is it just a matter of people's choices, or is there a definite line of people that are the have-nots and the haves, and it's always going to be that way? You know, I'm just throwing these out there because these issues of poverty and public assistance is not 10 or 20 or 30 years old. You know, this is decades old issues that don't seem to get any better.
That's right, and that's why when we have people who are working, drawing salaries and have the responsibility to lead who and what we do as a community, and that's speaking of government. This is policy. When we have people on staff, when we have elected officials and appointed officials whose job description includes addressing these problems and figuring it out, do we wait for solutions from the federal government? Do we derive those locally and we say this is our design because these are our standards and this is what the targets we're trying to hit? Or do we just wait until there's an example from somewhere else and then we cookie cutter it? Or we just say, okay, we'll wait until it's a problem that the federal government will throw money at, and then we'll stand up a program. But at some point when the federal government doesn't think of it as being a problem, then, sorry, we're going to turn our backs on it. And we're dealing with it as programs, not as impact on people that live within the sound of my voice.
Well, it goes back to your question or your example question about, okay, we provide service, internet service to these housing development areas, but it involves more than just saying I'm going to turn on the internet, right? Okay, after everything is provided, what next? You know, what is going to happen? Is it just a free service, or is it something to actually get them out of someplace? You know, where do we go from there?
Well, this is where public education comes in. It's where leadership comes in when we're trying to promote values, because God knows we don't have shared values in this community. We have our values that we ourselves hold, and we don't want people messing with our values or violating our values. But we have common values, and that is common decency and compassion. And we have the values that we share as Christians, as Buddhists, as whatever. We have values, but we don't practice them directly. When we're talking about people who are not directly connected to us through family, we expect the government to be the one that does that for us in our name, because it is the government that we have empowered to do these things for us, so that we have a community that reflects our values. And this is why I harp on the efficiency and effectiveness of the government of Guam, because this is what I expect them to do. When they go out and campaign and ask for the positions of leadership every 2 years, every 4 years, they tell us to our face while campaigning, I feel for you. I want to represent you. I want to bring your concerns into the people's house. And I want to corral the resources and the smarts and the time of the government of Guam to make this community a better place. And what do we get? What do we get? We get what's coming up in actually a couple moments. Let's see. Yeah, let's issue Guam IDs in the schools, because that's going to get us, these are the priorities. So I just gave you a hint. This is where we're going on the next part of Zami Ikatni. Decentralizing Guam ID issuance is a good idea, is the editorial today in the Guam Daily Post on page 24. Let's see. Let's see if this rises to the level of importance. Sometimes solutions to help untangle the bureaucratic processes in the government of Guam can come from simple and practical ideas. One recent example of something worthy of consideration for its simplicity and practicality came in the form of Bill 136. This proposed law would allow the issuance of Guam IDs through public high schools. It's impactful in a good way because it streamlines the process for our youth to acquire government-issued ID, which they need as they apply for jobs, send out college applications, open bank accounts, and conduct other transactions. Any idea that results in more convenience to the customer is always welcome, and decentralizing government functions is another good move. In this COVID-19 environment, alleviating the crowd and workload at the Department of Revenue and Taxation are more reasons this legislation should be breezing through the Guam legislature with a nod of approval. The processing and issuance of Guam IDs, coupled with the department's processing and handling of vehicle registrations, driver's licenses, business licenses, income tax matters, property tax matters, and nonprofit filings, as well as enforcement of a whole host of its mandates, not to mention recent pandemic cash relief processing and payouts, has been a lot for one department to handle. If schools are limited to issuing Guam IDs to their own students, this would be a very practical process because the schools have established and vetted the identities of those who are enrolled, hence decreasing, if not eliminating, imposters who might apply for Guam IDs. Every working day, there is usually a line of people applying for their Guam ID at Rev Tax. Many of our Guam youth will need a Guam ID at a time when they don't yet have a driver's license. So this means they are not the only ones making the trip to Rev Tax. They would have to ask someone to drive them to and from Rev Tax. If the students can get their Guam IDs at their schools, there would be fewer road trips, reduced need for gasoline, and less need for people accompanying the youth. That's time they would be able to save for something more important. The bill recognizes this plus factor. Quoting the legislation, many students face challenges when applying for forms of identification due to individual circumstances, most specifically transportation to the Department of Revenue and Taxation and difficulty affording the costs associated with the application process. Therefore, obtaining a Guam ID is the simplest option they may have in terms of attaining a valid form of identification, according to the legislation, which was introduced in July and discussed recently in a public hearing. For high school students applying through their schools, the Guam ID fee would be waived if this legislation becomes law. Rev Tax would be authorized to coordinate with the Guam Department of Education to establish a policy within 60 days from the enactment of this law. The policy will determine how students attending Guam public high schools can obtain assistance with the application process in their schools to obtain a Guam ID. GDOE would need to be provided with at least one staff member, perhaps part-time, to take care of the processing and paperwork for Guam ID applications. To the legislation's chief sponsors, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, Democrat, and Senators James C. Moylan, Republican, Talina Cruz Nelson, Democrat, Amanda L. Shelton, Democrat, and Mary Camacho Torres, Republican, thank you for this idea and for your collaboration. Before I wax poetic on this, let's go ahead and take another break here. We'll come back on in just a few moments with more Tall Tales.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations,
local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. We just heard the Guam Daily Post editorial today, Decentralizing Guam ID Issuance, a Good Idea. And we're looking forward to your phone calls. Got a few comments on Facebook I'll bring up in a moment. When I was reading this is kind of what came to mind. Perhaps it's a good idea. If this is good for students already in schools, what about the students who are in the private schools? They can go ahead and stand in line at Rev Tax like, everyone else. Pay fees at Rev Tax, but you don't pay fees at school. Fees for all services at Rev Tax. But if you have services that are being distributed out to schools, the service is free. But the schools are going to be providing coordination, integrity, and security for official ID cards. Is this for only 15 years of age and older? Any younger? As one person mentioned on Tall Tales' Facebook page a couple days ago, are parents involved? Will minors be required to carry it when they're out in public? Will police honor it for official reports? What about real problems concerning issuing real driver's licenses to everyone? And we can't issue real ID cards, right? We've been having that problem with real ID cards, so let's just go ahead and crank out fake ID cards? This is what this legislation is proposing. Let's not look at all the problems. Let's just give the kids an ID. Will these be considered sufficient for legal use? Opening bank accounts, cashing checks, applying for jobs, applying for public assistance, getting on a plane? Are these are going to carry the full weight of a government-issued ID card, right? How difficult will they be to tamper with? They only provided for one part-time person, like a runner or a program administrator. School IDs, as I mentioned the other day, at the expense of Rev Tax. Are these going to be vanity yearbook pictures? You're going to have just one part-time program employee, but school staffing for all students 15 and older. I'm just pulling an age out. Maybe it's going to be down to 14. Or is this just killing off the Guam ID program? It doesn't improve Rev Tax. It doesn't meet official purposes unless this process is really serious. We really don't need a Guam ID to equal a play ID. Nod, nod, wink, wink. Okay, but let's get serious. The legislature has identified approximate cause for traffic jams in the lines of Rev Tax. It's the Guam ID applicants. Getting those lines shorter is high on the wish list of Daphne Shimizu, who is overwhelmed with too many tasks and too few trained and trusted staff to carry it out. She can't beef up the driver's license division. She can't beef up the auto registration division with enough capable staff to handle the known demand. We know how many people we have. We know how many cars are on the road. We know how many people need to get driver's licenses. It's the same number of people. They just don't expand. Apparently, the legislature and the governor and the director of Rev and Tax just want students to stop clogging up the works. Make room for drivers who need to drive to work and students who are studying for their driver's license. The rest can use a school ID even after they graduate, or if they don't graduate. They'll be constantly reminded of what they could have been whenever they use their ID. Because it'll be a school-issued ID, not a Rev and Tax issued ID. Even when they're 20, 22. What's going to happen? You're still going to have people going to Rev and Tax to get a Guam ID who are not in high school. And apparently there's no need for a fiscal note, since implementing the law, if it's passed, simply authorizes public school administrators to think how they would handle this if they had to, as an unfunded mandate, and coordinate with Daphne to meet Rev and Tax standards. Within 60 days, of course. Or else, they're going to incur the wrath of the sponsors of the bill, the ones I just read out to you, for dissing their good idea and leaving Daphne to drown in Guam ID applicants. Perhaps the sponsors don't want to expose young, impressionable minds to the disappointment in public administration that is the Guam Department of Revenue and Taxation, until at least they voted in one election. Obviously, there's no legislative agenda by the governor. No priorities, no collaboration with fellow Democrat leaders, no direction, no solutions. Only consensus to pass whatever bills can go into re-election campaign materials to tell voters, I did this. And this editorial doesn't substantiate the need, although needs exist. What do we demand, and where is the public interest? Well, we've got a call. Andre, wow. Andre, you've got about 45 seconds, but thank you very much for the call.
Daryl, thank you for taking my call. It's an interesting conversation. I think some historical background is necessary for that, for the ID law, for the Guam ID law that was recently that they recently were debating about. Well, anyways, it started at our school at Simon Sanchez from our principal, who kind of brought it up to our attention that this was an issue. James Moylan was, very gracious enough to come down and listen to our concerns, because these concerns came from the students themselves. So it may not be a big, gigantic issue, and that everybody would want to see solved, like poverty or anything like that. But it is coming from, from a sincere place. So, I just want to say that, that the senators, I thank all of them, especially Senator Jim Moylan, for bringing this to his colleagues and making this, putting this out there so that the kids do have some relief, because a lot of them do need IDs and don't have the means necessary to get there, like driving and so on and so forth. So this is important.
Okay, thank you very much, Andre, for your perspective on this. I appreciate your call.
It's not a perspective.
It's
what happened.
It's 5 o'clock, and it's time for Fox News.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3
Senate's voting to break
HD3.
the debt ceiling deadlock.
A party line vote approved a $480 billion debt limit increase in the Democrat-led Senate, only after 11 Republicans joined Democrats on an earlier procedural vote to overcome a filibuster.
The yeas are 61, the nays are 38.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell proposed a short-term debt limit hike enough to extend the default deadline into December. Republicans insist Democrats must pass a long-term debt limit increase on their own, using a reconciliation process already underway for a multi-trillion-dollar spending plan. The House must now approve the short-term debt limit deal.
Fox's Jared Halpern on Capitol Hill. President Biden defending his call for vaccine mandates at a construction company in suburban Chicago yesterday.
Look, I know the vaccination requirements are tough medicine. Unpopular with some. politics for others, but they're life-saving. They're game-changing for our country.
But even with vaccines readily available, new data compiled by Johns Hopkins University says more people have died from the coronavirus so far this year than did in all of last year. The showdown in Florida over whether schools should be allowed to mandate masks in the classroom will soon hit some school districts in the budget.
The Florida State Board of Education's approved a plan to deduct an amount equal to a month's pay from school board members in 8 counties. Those school districts have been violating the ban on mask mandates imposed by Governor Ron DeSantis. The Biden administration's pledge to offset sanctions imposed by the state against board members. DeSantis has been saying parents should decide if their children will wear a mask to school. But the defiant school officials have been arguing mask rules are needed to protect kids from COVID.
Fox's Jill Nato. America is listening to Fox News.
Great news, Guam! Chili's 2 for Dining is back. Enjoy a full-on meal deal made for 2 for just $35. Start with 2 Coca-Cola beverages, an appetizer to share, and 2 mouth-watering entrees like the sizzling personal fajitas, the mouth-watering honey chipotle steak and shrimp, or Chili's world-famous fall-off-the-bone baby back ribs. Available for a limited time. Dine in today or call 648-7377 to place to-go orders. Chili's is located on the 2nd floor of Dumont Sands Plaza. Chili's. Savor the moment.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Changes are coming at the country's top spy agency.
CIA Director William Burns said in a statement they're making adjustments to the CIA's organizational structure. That includes the formation of a China Mission Center. The statement says this center will focus on, quote, the most important geopolitical threat we face, an increasingly adversarial Chinese government. The statement also announces a new Chief Technology Officer position and a transnational and technology mission center to focus on what they call issues critical to U.S. competitiveness. These announcements come as the New York Times reports that last week, counterintelligence officials warned every CIA station around the world about the high number of informants who've been killed, captured, or compromised in recent years. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Former President Trump will claim executive privilege on behalf of his former White House aides, including Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who've been subpoenaed to testify to the House Select Committee investigating what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. The committee wants to know what was being said at the White House leading up to the congressional certification of the Electoral College results. A man who fatally shot one person and wounded 14 others before killing himself at a Tennessee grocery store last month used 3 guns purchased legally over the past year and a half. Police in Collierville announcing Thursday that 29-year-old UK Thang used 2 pistols and a rifle in the shooting. He'd been asked to leave by management after a disagreement with an employee. He returned that afternoon, shooting 10 employees and 5 customers. The Wall Street Journal reports supply chain problems are a growing problem for U.S. food companies. That plus rising labor and transportation costs are causing major food suppliers to boost prices. And supply chain shortages are also hitting a big holiday item. The American Christmas Tree Association says months of drought and delivery issues will mean fewer Christmas trees to sell this year. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instaguam to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. Zero down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Darrell Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie this afternoon, and we are taking your calls here at 888-8255. Had Andre on the line before our break there at the top of the hour, and right at the very end, I thanked him for his perspective, and he made the comment, I don't know if you could hear it, he said, "It's not my perspective, something like it's the truth," or something like that, which is what I was thanking him for, because it's really my point. Why is there a bill? Why can't the Department of Education and the Department of Revenue and Taxation get their heads together and just come up with a way, a procedure that allows them to drop the application forms off and pick them up? This is the point. And this is what Andre was saying. This was why they suggested it in the first place. Does it have to be authorized by law to simplify the processes at Rev and Tax? If so, are there not more processes that need 8 votes in the legislature to change? Is that how stuck Daphne Shimizu is? Or does she need more people up there? And yes, if you can address Guam ID traffic at Rev and Tax by distributing it out, and securely, because you're carrying Social Security numbers, you're carrying phone numbers, birth dates, verifiable information that goes into IDs, which is something that has to be kept secure. If you can figure that out, or if you can even do it online, aren't you going to catch 80% if you do it online? Don't involve the schools at all. Like we're doing with the vehicle registration renewals. But for personal ID, picture ID, how well thought through is this? Is there a reason why they can't do it without the legislature telling them to? And they're not really telling them to. They're saying, you do it, you figure out how to do it, in 60 days come back to us. But with that kind of a suggestion, you don't need a bill to do that. You just have to do it. And that's really what I'm getting at here. And maybe I'm belittling this bill because it shows the level of response in the legislature to shortcomings in the executive branch when they might really be talking about having more technology at Revenue Tax or more personnel at Revenue Tax or training people, projecting how to improve processes and implementing that rather than just trying to cut down the numbers of people in line and making a convenience for Guam ID applicants. There are many, many more applicants up at Revenue Tax who need to come in and bring their confidential documents, present them for official record keeping, verify their identity and the business that they're there to conduct. That is a serious matter. If Guam IDs are serious light, then perhaps the procedure should already be light. And you can do it with this. But we have traffic jams at Revenue Tax, procedural traffic jams for foreseeable problems. And that is what I'd like to see addressed. And I just, I don't mind burning up an hour or two of time here on Tall Tales talking about Guam ID, tweaking the Guam ID system, if we can make the point that we don't need to tweak the Guam ID system and spend a lot of time doing that. It should just be done. We need to be talking about major tweaks that are going to be major improvements to the level of service and convenience for the other 80 or 90% of the people who use Revenue Tax as consumers, as customers of the government's own processes. I've got Frenchie on the line. Frenchie, you've got something to talk about with Guam IDs?
Oh, very little. I would suggest that we do, if the level, I've been trying to get my license renewed since January this year.
Mm-hmm.
I still haven't had an appointment settled yet. And every time I try to go to the tax and revenue, the line is like being at Disneyland, except at Disneyland the line moves.
Yes.
Right?
It doesn't
and
move.
At my age, I don't want to be in the heat and everything waiting for hours. They were supposed to go online and do the process online. It's still not up. The only thing that they're doing well right now online is the car registration, which you can do. But
Yes.
there is one thing that would alleviate that huge demand would be to make the license good for 10 years, like they do in most states on the mainland.
Yes, that's right. They can project.
Then you would cut in half the problem, because instead of every 3 or 5 years, like it is here, you would do it every 10 years, and so you wouldn't have the level of time. The other thing I would make sure is that people answer their goddamn phone, which they never do. I have not yet called an office at GovGuam that answer their phone.
It was so easy when they moved. They started moving the offices around and getting new phone systems, and then specializing to make sure that you only had to call the specific area and not a general area to have like a switchboard, but you had to call the specific office because there was no general number to call and be able to be transferred, and then you couldn't get anybody on the line. It's like
you can't. The Guam administration people do not want to answer their phone. So I would surmise, and I would tell the legislator, confiscate all the phones, sell them 50 cents on the dollar, and take all the phones out of the administration. They don't need them. They don't answer them. Okay? Take them out. You'll save money. And then for the rest, it's saying, and then, you know, Guam has a very strange rules regarding driver license. I had a Class B license in Minnesota because I had a very large RV. So you need gross weight over 26,000 pounds and articulated vehicle and things like this. Because when I go hunting for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and go in the Dakotas, Montana, Idaho, and all that, I had a very large RV where I lived in with the dogs, all the guns and everything. But here they give you, what was it? They transfer you to being able to drive a Jeep.
Yeah.
Well, then I found out that the reason they don't transfer those license here on Guam is because the union that represents the bus drivers, the school bus drivers, don't want outsiders to come and drive buses. And watching them drive school buses around the island, I can tell you a few fresh drivers among driving the bus licenses would not be bad, because as far as safety, none of those drivers are following standard operating procedures. They are not. They are taking a lot of chance. They're going way over the speed limit, and it's very bad. So, but that's not the reason I was calling. Even though you got me started on this.
I got you started.
I was starting about Pete's call after I hung up yesterday. And Pete is very interesting because he basically, I was pleased that he thought that I was very articulate, because since English is not my first language, it's actually not even my second language, it's my third language. I always try to make it easy as possible for people to understand what I try to advance. So at least I did something right. But then he went on to say, well, and then he likes the U.S. Constitution, but, you know, the Constitution is not perfect. It is flawed. And to which you answered that, yeah, it is flawed, but the Founding Father also made it possible to add new articles to the Constitution which address some of the things that need to be addressed, right?
Yes.
Which was a very good point that you made. And then he said, well, and then regarding January 6th, he must be blind if he believes what he says. So I'd like to address those things.
Okay.
Number one, Pete basically confirms my argument that a large part of the political spectrum nowadays does not see or believe the Constitution as being the cornerstone of our political system. They do not agree with some of it. Some of them are against the Second Amendment. Some of them want to change the meaning of the First Amendment, and so on and so forth. I mean, the examples are on and on and on. And then, of course, you have the 1619 project that says everything is flawed and we should just throw it away. So, which was one of the arguments I was making, which is, unfortunately nowadays, in the past, people disagreed politically, but they all agreed that the Constitution was what gave us the system we have now, for better or for worse, and that even though it is not perfect, it is still the best system out there. And, you know, I've lived on 5 continents. I've lived in 12 different countries. And I can tell you, and I travel in over 100 countries, I can tell you our system is pretty darn good. And to believe otherwise is to poke yourself in the eye. And so that was one of my points. The other point being, you know, I mean, the Constitution is the oldest constitution in place in the world at this time. And basically, it gave us a lot of stability. And that's the way I look at it. That's why, even though I chose to become a U.S. citizen, I did it by choice. And one of the reasons is that I thought the political system is probably the best around the world, and I've seen a lot of different constitutions. The average length of life of a constitution around the world is 14 years. So that gives you an idea of the gap between us and the rest of the world. So the other thing was, well, I must be blind if I believe what I said about January 6th. And I am not blind, and I did not advance what I was relaying on Wednesday and Thursday as being my own belief. I brought forward the fact that many media groups and other observers that were looking at the whole process had come around and did a 360 on their assessment of what happened. And it was BuzzFeed, which is not a right-wing conspiracy theorist, it's a left-wing group, that revealed that 12 out of 23 so-called conspirators in Michigan that were supposed to have attempted to kidnap the governor, which we now know was a fairy tale, were FBI agents. We know that Director Wray, which is the head of the FBI, suspended the lead FBI investigator in Michigan after he was strongly rebuked by the federal judge leading the trial. Those are facts. I didn't invent them.
Right.
It was the New York Times and Politico, who both are left-leaning, center to left-leaning, I will give you that benefit, that recanted their stories from last January and basically said they made a mistake in their assessment based on what the FBI officially declared, that they had not found any evidence of conspiracy. It was Mr. Greenwald, who again is a left-leaning libertarian, that connected the dots between Pelosi and the Capitol Police and the riots, right? And it was Time magazine, also not a right-wing magazine, who in a stunning article back in March revealed that there was a coordinated action between big tech, the mainstream media, the DNC, to silence, to any opposition before, during, and after the election. And they seem to be very pleased about this fact at the time when they revealed it. But it was very telling of what we had lived through, which basically led to some pretty ridiculous situations. Like, I don't know if you know Babylon Bee, the satirical website.
No.
They were accused by fact checkers of running a false story. Now they are a satirical cartoon place, right?
Yeah, you can't
Because
cartoons are supposed to be
satirical.
Satirical, yeah.
I haven't seen too many funny cartoons, but they made a cartoon making fun of CNN buying a washing machine so that they could spin better.
Okay.
And they got fact checked. So this is a ridiculous, of a time that we are living in right now. And the other reason I'm not blind and far from it is my personal history. Like my grandpa used to say, opinions is like a-holes, right?
Yeah.
We all have one.
Right.
But this is not an opinion. It's just more of a formation. It's the result of how I was brought up and how I lived my life. My family history during World War II was one of fighting the Nazis, and when I was a kid, the conversations around the table, I lost two uncles in concentration camp. One came back in very bad shape. My grandfather on my father's side, his younger brother, was shot as a hostage by the SS. So we have a very strong awareness of how far evil can go and what you need to do in order to fight it. And I was really embedded in this as a child, on top of being raised Catholic in a very traditional sense. So it was also my education, which I was lucky enough, I am lucky enough to be old enough to have received a decent, very decent education of classical, what you would call a classical education, and which unfortunately a lot of kids now do not have the chance to have. And then I was able, after I arrived in the U.S., to continue my studies in very good universities and do some works on history, which I always love. And then it's also my personal experience working with some very prominent families like the Swig family, the Feinstein Bloom family, the senator. I spent time with the Pelosi's at their house several times. I met with the whole Brown, so the whole California Democratic machine. I also spent a lot of time with two very funny people I saw, and I didn't expect that at all. One was Gerald Ford and the other one was Bob Hope. And I met them through a good friend of mine, who's Alex Spanos, who happens to be the second largest house builder in the United States and is the owner of the Chargers, the football team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you meet those people and you kind of see how sausage is made in the behind the scene,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives you an awareness of what stories are being fed to us and what really it means. And that's why I'm always very critical. And I have not talked about January 6th until very recently because I wanted the dust to settle. I wanted to make sure the truth had time to come up and that the hyperbole and the hysterics would come down, because this is never good, right? We can agree on that.
Yes, I do agree.
And so basically what Pitt did is that and I've seen it do it against Michael St. Nicholas. When he cannot argue with the message, he attacks the messenger. And I don't think it's right. I mean, it's being done all the time in politics. But, this is, like Bob called it, a conservative show, even though
although he let me in the room.
President is not particularly conservative.
You can say it.
But you're trying to be honest, which is good. And then basically, like Bob likes to remind us, it's always the narrative against the fact. And then today, as I was reading the post, it kind of dawned on me that's exactly what had happened in that conversation with Pete yesterday. There is an opinion piece which Bob would call a boilerplate. He likes to call them that way.
Yes.
Because that's what it is. It's a boilerplate. And it's titled Republicans Are Siding with the Angry Mob. And it's written by Paul Waldman. I know Paul Waldman. He's a far left editorialist, works for the Post, but he used to work for Plumline and the American Prospect, which is a democratic think tank economical online magazine. And he makes a lot of assertions, which I don't think we have time to go over this today, because I want other people to call.
And I really didn't want to, and I didn't want to bring that up because I have the same conclusion. I don't need this kind of characterization. I just want the facts, and then I'll make my own, draw my own conclusions. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going over it at another time as a side thing, and to show that you can really make good argument turn bad by not being honest in the way you present them.
Yes.
And basically, the way I see it is that you have all those kind of arguments at this time and place right now, because some people do not want to talk about the real issues, one of them being the budget and the Babylonian type of spending that is trying to be pushed forward. And then, of course, the other one is the catastrophic situation we have at the border, which is going to make the 2015 refugee crisis in Europe look like a piece of cake. And I think we will live with the consequence of this crisis for decades to come. You and I will both be dead. Our children and grandchildren will still be dealing with what is happening at this time on the southern border.
This is a good place to put a period on it. I agree with you completely. Our nation has been changed by immigration, significantly changed in the past, a number of times. And this is another time that we're going to have a large change. And maybe it'll be for the worse, maybe for the better. We don't really know. But Frenchie, I want to thank you very much for your call this afternoon, and wish you a very good weekend. And we'll talk again on Monday or Tuesday, okay?
We'll try to survive these opportunities.
Yes, we'll try to survive. Okay, thank you very much. Let's take that break, Jose, and then we'll come back with more Tall Tales and your telephone call at 888-8255.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Dumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Contact Express Financial for all your financial needs. Express Financial is consumer lending at its very best. They also have a host of dealer service programs with quick approvals. There are 3 ways to apply. Over the phone at 637-9834. You may visit their office in person at 600 Harmon Loop Road across the street from Costules. Or you can also visit their webpage and apply at myexpressfinancial.com. In most cases, you'll get your money the same day.
Welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie this afternoon, and looking forward to your call at 888-8255. In the meantime, we'll be talking about a few more things that we've found in the newspaper these past couple of days, because there's lots going on. I mean, it's a great story today about the Iron Dome missile defense, and the kinds of capability that is being brought to Guam on a trial basis. It's been rolled out in Israel, works great. South Korea is looking to put a system in for itself because it responds to multiple threats. And those multiple threats, unmanned drones, subsonic cruise missiles. You know, we have the THAAD against ballistic missiles, and now we've got this Iron Dome missile defense, which was a joint technology between Israel and the U.S. And now the U.S. is starting to roll some out. But we've got one of the only 2 experimental units that the United States owns. And at the end of the article, it repeats some of a story that appeared in a newspaper that serves Capitol Hill and the people who work in Congress on both the House and Senate side. A letter that discussed the importance of Guam in the ability of the United States to fulfill its treaty obligations to allies in the Pacific, allies and democracies in this area. That without Guam, the U.S.'s ability to carry out its obligations gets complicated. It's such a nice way to put it. And it's not a feature of our virtue as people, as residents, as citizens, as people of the land. It's just where we are in context of what's going on everywhere else. We don't build missiles. Some of us may have gone off someplace and helped build missiles. We're not threatening to invade anyone, but certainly around in the area there are some folks who would love to take over places like Guam for their own purposes. Some may say, well, that's what's happened already, and that's why we're in this pickle. Somebody took us over, and so now we've become a target. It wouldn't change. Anyone who would take this island would make it a target, because that's what's going on out there beyond the horizon. Guam is attractive for geopolitical purposes. It was attractive as a place for Magellan to stop and get a drink of water. It was attractive for a place for whaling vessels to come to pull in and be able to load up with 6 months' provisions, because there was enough dried beef and fresh vegetables available to stockpile their ships and go back out and hunt whales for 6 months without having to put into port for supplies. It was important enough to grab it as a place to stockpile coal for the leading technology of fast Navy ships, as the U.S. was beginning to become a world power and develop a Navy that would go beyond its shores, its immediate coastlines, and be involved in the world. It was important enough not to fortify after 1922 in order to try to keep the tensions down in this area, not have an arms race that would have happened between here and Rota and Saipan, because Guam essentially was surrounded by Yap and Chuuk and Saipan, and a hostile, or at least a rival, power. And then it was important as a place to take the fight to the Japanese mainland, not go into Taiwan and attack from there, or go straight to Okinawa and attack from there. Guam was necessary. Guam, Ulithi as an anchorage together, and to make sure that that hostile forces were not here that would impede the ability of the U.S. military to continue its march across, to project power and bring the war to an end. And it was an important place for bombing and for bringing in supplies and troops and bringing out wounded and troops that had completed their tours of duty in the Vietnam War, because the countries around Vietnam did not want to be that involved in a civil war. They didn't want to have to be the ones on the front line taking sides in the Civil War. They had to live in the neighborhood. But from Guam, the U.S. could project power and allow those neighbors to be less involved. And here we are again in a position to defend our allies in the area, and Guam necessary for the U.S. to fulfill those obligations. And the front page story in today's Post: the Iron Dome missile defense system deployed to Guam is just another part of the overall value of Guam as a location to the United States, which is the administering authority, and we enjoy our lives here as residents. The two don't have to meet, although in ways that are constructive. And so I wanted to just bring that up because it is what it is. There was an article in the paper about how there was water crisis. We don't have a water crisis. We've got more water than anywhere except Pohnpei. And you have to go how far to Pohnpei to get water. So we've got water. And that's the value of this island. And you get 10 inches of water in 3 days. And you don't have to, up in Saipan, they only got 3 or 4 inches. We got 10. And that's the difference between Saipan and Guam. In Saipan, they cannot even store that much water in the aquifer. It runs off, and you don't have real developed lake. Because the lake they do have is brackish. Guam, we've got water. Rota, there's water. No harbor. What else do we have here today? The Navy plans a new fence for forest restoration project. And today, on page 8 of the PDN. And what's interesting about that, in the sense of excavating the point, what was the point of all this? We've seen these fences go up along Route 3A, Northwest Field. They trying to keep the snakes out. What did I do here? I'm looking at this. I don't see the. I'm looking for that article. It's interesting because of the last line. Oh, here it is on page 4, page 3. So it goes on and it talks about the agreement, and the public has until November 21st to comment on the fence project. The military plans to build a fence inside Marine Corps Base Camp Blaz as part of a larger project to restore more than 1,100 acres of forest on base to its pre-contact state. The Navy on Thursday issued a memo describing the fence project, which is intended to control the movement of snakes, pigs, rats, cats, and deer into the forested area that is being restored. The fence project is called the Brown Tree Snake Exclusion Barrier South and would enclose a forested area to the southwest of the main cantonment area of the base, which is still under construction. A larger forested area to the north of the main cantonment is also scheduled to be restored. The forest restoration project will remove invasive plants and animals from the area and bring in native and endemic plant species. Plants introduced to Guam after the island's first contact with Europeans will be killed and cut down. Paths will be cleared in the forest in order to provide access for plant transplants and to allow for the maintenance of plants and trees. Irrigation lines also will be brought into the area to provide water for the plants. The fence project includes gates to allow natural resources workers to enter the forest. And this was the part that really grabbed me, the last line. The memo states there are no historic properties within the project area. Now, what's interesting about that is there were significant historic properties discovered during the construction of the base. But for 1,100 acres, they have not identified, or they are saying that there are no historic properties. Now, for one part, I'm happy that somebody's doing it. That the military has the money to do it is federal funds. But on the civilian side, the government of Guam, for all its lip service for and encouragement of to honor and promote a local destination, promote the Chamorro identity, has done nothing with lands under its control. Nothing. It doesn't enforce very well historic preservation and archaeology on lands that are inspected by it. For private land development, it does nothing with its own public lands along the same lines. We could be doing this, but the effort is to wait until somebody else is paying for it. Well, I should be smiling because we've got 10 minutes to go, and then there's a weekend, and it's not a holiday for us on Monday. We'll be here because we're not going to be off at a beach barbecuing and sucking them up to celebrate the effort that Europeans made to discover the rest of us. Because they found out that we were out here and that we had technologies and we had resources is Columbus Day. It's the age of discovery. And that's what they call it. But we're not going to celebrate that here. We'll wait until we talk about Magellan in March, okay? Early March. But in the meantime, we know that many people are going to be having this day off as a federal holiday. But we'll be here on Monday. Let's take a break, our last break of the show, and then we'll be back to wrap up today's show.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tinactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
And welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Darrell Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie, and I've got our Keith on the line. Got in just in time, Keith. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Darrell. Well, just so that I don't get the reputation of being a complete curmudgeon, I wanted to compliment you on that little news story that you relayed a minute ago about the wildlife areas. It's good that you're covering that. I am a contractor for the military, and I get to go into, as part of my job, some pretty remote places on this island, and a lot of them are on bases. And I can tell you that the military, particularly over the past couple of years, and it might be due to the, political pressures or a change in values or however you want to view it, but is really putting some effort into Guam's wildlife restoration and, evaluating impacts of, some of the construction projects that I know I'm partaking of. And, it's not cheap either. And so it's nice to have that pointed out, because some of these areas really are very unique. And I feel blessed to have been able to visit them. Mm-hmm. And they do deserve to be preserved. And thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, thank you, Keith, for the call. I grew up here, and I used to run around in the jungles back in the early 1960s, up around Two Lovers Point and up at Nick Tam's area. That was all my playground. That the shoreline and the jungles along the cliff and on top of the cliff, and up to Northwest Field. That was my playground, and I remember the place just lousy with birds. There were so many birds. We had BB guns. But we wouldn't shoot the birds. We'd shoot, little things or geckos, right? But we wouldn't shoot the birds. But there were all kinds of birds. And then there were no birds. But it was this was before we saw snakes. The birds were gone. And it was only afterwards that there were a lot of snakes. And I also watched as land that had been basically guarded, but not to the extent that it is now, because of the importance of the bases now. The lands went from being simply fallow to and available for hunters to go in, from the civilian side to go in. But the military, like up at Retidian, they turned to the Fish and Wildlife Service to administer the property as a federal property in a way that it could not justify as a military base. And the area around Marine Corps Camp Blas, Base Camp Blas, is those vast jungle areas that are pristine and deserving of preservation are being double fenced because it is really good for the security of the bases against infiltration, which had happened with the boat people coming in from the Northern Marianas, and also we have Chinese submarines the one Chinese submarine that penetrated our the exercises about 4 years ago. They came through the exercise, surfaced between Guam and Rota, and announced their presence, and then went back through the exercise undetected. And that kind of activity scared the pants off the military, and they're finally doing something to secure their shorelines. And so I see it as being double, triple wins. But for the purpose, the stated purpose of preservation, the government of Guam does nothing until it's paid for. The military has to do it because they have to comply with historic preservation and archaeology laws and stuff like this. But they also have an opportunity to justify it in terms of preservation and also the critical habitat designations that take those lands away from consideration for release. And so they win several ways, and the people of Guam, they don't really win because those areas are unavailable. And we politically, on the civilian side, don't partner well with people in the Northern Marianas where it remains beautiful. And that's perhaps where we're going to have to go in the future. But right now, I am so happy that they're doing this. I was also a subcontractor worked for a subcontractor on base. I used to go to some very, very remote areas, and I just absolutely loved it. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And
there are things that most people, and I would dare say even most residents, have never seen.
That's right. That's right. And because it's been only from our grandparents' time that access to these areas is afforded. You can't, because on private lands, you're not really supposed to go into other people's private lands, but because the military lands are public lands, or they were crown lands. They were lands that the Spanish government owned and turned over to the naval government, and then naval government to Gov Guam, or they took them back and they took them and made bases in these areas. They are still, they're accessible under permit. But now, even as they remove the pigs and the deer, then and restore the plants, there will not be, and they'll be able to pull the plants from places where they're going to develop and put them there. Well, it's 2021. You know, what can we do except to thank them for their efforts and maybe take a hint ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Keith.
Very good. Take it easy and have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. You should have the weekend off, right? I mean, Monday off?
Yeah, I wish.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll be here on Monday afternoon, and I hope you are too on Tall Tales. I'm Darrell Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. I'll be back on Monday at 4. Ray Gibson will be back on Monday at 6 a.m. right here on The Point. Have a good weekend, everyone.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3. 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Approved. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. In the Senate, voting to pass a short-term $480 billion increase in the country's debt limit. Senate Majority Leader Schumer says now
Senate Democrats will focus on passing Build Back Better agenda, so we can finally build up ladders of opportunity for people to climb up to the middle class.
The House will vote to approve the debt limit extension and then send it to the president. The White House says he is anxious to sign it. President Biden traveled to suburban Chicago yesterday to claim vaccine mandates are working.
I'm calling on more employers to act. My message is require your employees to get vaccinated. With vaccinations, we're going to beat this pandemic finally. Without them, we face endless months of chaos in our hospitals, damage to our economy, and anxiety in our schools.
Under orders from the president, the Labor Department soon expected to issue workplace rules requiring any company that employs more than 100 people to compel their workers to get vaccinated. Investigators say they now have new information on the origins of the coronavirus.
January 2020, the Chinese government isolates the city of Wuhan only weeks after revealing to the world that a deadly virus was spreading there. A new report says Chinese authorities knew months before that COVID was circulating. Australian-U.S. research firm Internet 2.0 says the Chinese province that was the epicenter of the first COVID-19 outbreak initiated a dramatic increase in buying PCR tests, the type of kits Americans now use to test for the coronavirus, suggesting that the virus was highly likely to be spreading virulently in Wuhan, China, as early as the summer of 2019, and definitely by the early autumn.
Fox's Rich Edson at the State Department. The administration says an investigation by the intelligence community